It was the summer of 2023 when the Taylor family decided to leave their cramped apartment in New York City and settle into a spacious house in the quiet town of Elmswood, Massachusetts. The house, an old Victorian with peeling paint and overgrown ivy, seemed like a perfect escape from the city hustle. The listing described it as a fixer-upper with untold potential, and though it was a bit more affordable than the family expected, the price seemed too good to be true, but they were ready for a fresh start. The first night in the house felt normal. The creaking floors, the old pipes groaning in the walls, it was all part of the charm. But as the days passed, odd things began to happen. It started with little noises in the attic, a soft rhythmic tapping at night that no one could explain. Sometimes it would sound like footsteps above their heads, slow and deliberate. Mr. Taylor, thinking it was just squirrels or perhaps the house settling, didn't give it much thought. But then things escalated. One evening, as Mrs. Taylor was putting away dishes, she heard a faint whisper from the attic. It was just a word, a name, Sarah. She froze. Sarah was the name of the previous owner of the house, a woman who had passed away under mysterious circumstances many years ago. She hadn't thought much of the rumors surrounding Sarah's death until now. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Mrs. Taylor couldn't sleep. The whispering had returned, louder this time, and she could swear she heard faint footsteps following her around the house. The old floorboards creaked under the weight of someone or something moving through the halls. In a panic, she woke her husband. He checked the attic but found nothing. The house, dark and silent, seemed to mock their fear. Mr. Taylor dismissed it as an overactive imagination, but the next day something strange happened. When they returned from grocery shopping, the front door was wide open, despite having locked it before leaving. A cold breeze rushed through the house as if someone had been waiting for them. Mrs. Taylor's unease grew, but she couldn't explain why. The feeling of being watched was constant. One night, Mrs. Taylor was unable to shake the feeling that someone was in the house with her. She decided to confront her fear and went into the attic. As she climbed the stairs, the temperature dropped significantly. The whispering was louder now, and the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. And then she saw it, a shadowy figure in the corner of the attic staring at her. It was the shape of a woman, pale with long tangled hair. But the worst part wasn't her appearance, it was her eyes. Hollow, lifeless eyes that seemed to pierce through Mrs. Taylor's very soul. Frozen in fear, she couldn't move. The figure slowly began to walk toward her, its steps soft and deliberate. Every time Mrs. Taylor tried to scream, no sound escaped her mouth. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall, but the figure was getting closer. Just as it reached out for her, everything went pitch black. When Mrs. Taylor awoke, she found herself back in her bed, drenched in sweat. It had all felt so real. Was it a nightmare, or had it been something more? She wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. Something in that house was not right. The next morning, Mrs. Taylor found a journal hidden under the floorboards of the attic. It belonged to Sarah, the previous owner. The pages were filled with frantic scribbles about a presence in the house, an entity that would never leave. One entry stood out. The house is hungry. It wants me, but it will take them instead. As she read further, Mrs. Taylor discovered that Sarah had vanished mysteriously just days after she had written those words. No one had ever found her body. As night fell once again, the whispering returned. But this time, it wasn't just the word Sarah, it was calling out to Mrs. Taylor by name. "Join us, Elizabeth." Mrs. Taylor knew the house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and whatever had claimed Sarah wasn't done. It was waiting for its next victim. Would the Taylor family be the next ones to disappear? Or could they break free from the house's terrifying grip before it was too late? The answers lay hidden within the house's dark history, but some secrets are too dangerous to uncover. In Elmswood, the Taylor family soon learned that not all homes are meant to be lived in, and some houses never let go. The house had claimed another. The days following the discovery of Sarah's journal were filled with tension. Elizabeth, Mrs. Taylor, couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was lurking in every corner of their new home. The house seemed to take on a life of its own. Rooms grew colder when no one was around, and shadows seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. Her husband, Greg, was still skeptical, attributing it all to stress. He dismissed the journal as nothing more than the ramblings of a woman driven to madness.